want to begin by saying Christ is risen, and you will all respond,
He is risen indeed.
Thank you. And what a wonderful day to be breaking open the words. We're, of course, pre-recording, but getting into the Spirit. And we have John's story of the first resurrection appearance, Mary Magdalene playing a key role. I'm fascinated by this. But first of all, Gary Griffin-Smith in Gore, welcome back. Mannie Marara in Masterton in the Wairarapa. Lisa Emerson in Palmerston North in Manawatu, spreading ourselves around the country. Lovely to have you on board. Lisa, a little bit of background.
Okay, thanks, Michael. This is surely one of the most loved passages in all of Scripture, and it comes after a chapter of absolutely harrowing detail, which describes Jesus' torture, the callousness of the bureaucracy of the time, the lonely death of Jesus with only the women at his feet, the disciples fled and scattered, and then his burial. And Mary Magdalene has been there throughout this time of his suffering. And here we find her in John 20 in the darkness, stricken with grief and despair. And even his beloved body has been taken from her. And to think about this, I thought about the feature of a dying God, which is familiar in non-Christian myth, in fiction, and perhaps most popularly in recent years in superhero movies. So there are many stories of when God dies, when the good is vanquished by the bad, the light is snuffed out by the darkness, when all seems lost, as it does here. But I think what is distinctively different is about what happens next. So in non-Christian myths and stories, the god, the hero, returns to life in a blaze of glory. He appears on a mountaintop or in the heart of a battle, surrounded by light, to the joy of a crowd of loyal followers and the horror of his enemies. And he fights one last epic battle, which destroys all the agents of darkness, and the world is put right again. But none of that is here in this passage. In an obscure garden, in a semi-darkness as the dawn breaks over the horizon, our God comes back to life. He comes back to comfort a lost and heartbroken woman. The light of the world returns not with a sword, but with the gentle speaking of a woman's name. And after literally a lifetime of reading this passage, his saying of her name and her heart-wrought response still sends shivers down my spine. She recognizes not just her name, but the exact timbre and intonation of the person who says it, because she has heard that voice before. And there is so much to be amazed by here. The familiarity of the story should not make us immune to astonishment and wonder and awe. For the first time in human history, someone returned from the dead in a living, breathing body. Christ's death and resurrection are at the very heart of our faith. And I love St. Paul, who says, if this is not true, then we are to be more pitied than any other. So our belief in the truth of this reading is at the core of what it means to be Christian. So we should be amazed by the story, but we should also be amazed by the manner of his return. The sun just visible above the horizon, a garden, an empty tomb, and a woman called by name by the one who loves her best.
Well, I don't like to say this, Lisa, but bringing a tear to my eye, and Gary and Mannie, I think we might pack up and go. Thank you, Lisa. That was such a beautiful introduction and such a vivid passage. And the calling of Mary by name has always stirred my heart hugely. But let's go, Mannie, to you for what do you find challenging when you read this passage?
One of the first challenges I have is the apparent forgetfulness or lack of faith that the disciples display. Jesus had told his disciples that he would rise again, and they seem to have forgotten or lost faith when they come looking for him. I appreciate it's very easy for us to judge the disciples with the benefit of hindsight and the knowledge that we now have. They did not have our advantage. So I find that challenging. Why did they suddenly doubt or seem confused by all of this? My other minor challenge is some detail that is included. And I'm still intrigued as to why this was included. Peter was outrun by the other disciple, but it's just intriguing to me why this little bit of information was included. It seems sort of out of place when we're talking of really profound matters.
And I'm right with you there, Manny. I read that and I find this sort of slightly testosterone-y thing, and then the contrast with Mary,
Yes.
who just gets
Yeah.
on with it. So
Yes.
again, I think it may throw us back to Mary. But
Yeah.
Gareth, what about you? A challenge?
I found it hugely challenging, and Lisa, I found that an amazing introduction. Thank you,
Yes.
because it resonates with me in that all week as I've been looking at this, I've been thinking of how different my Easter is to compare to their Easter.
Mm.
We will on Easter Sunday begin as we did early on. Christ is risen; He's risen indeed. And I sometimes think I might as well stand up and say, "My coffee is hot," and they say it's hot indeed.
Yeah.
We become so familiar with it that the challenge for me is how do I find within myself some sense of wonder and bewilderment? Because the first Easter didn't have that. It
Yeah.
had trepidation and confusion and even fear and maybe a bit of anger thrown in there. Mary, the wonderful, beautiful Mary, runs to that tomb to look for a dead body and runs back, not saying he's risen. She says they've stolen him because he's dead. And that sets them running back to the tomb as well. And of course, then the story unfolds. But the benefit of hindsight is often a good thing, but yet it can actually be quite a bad thing, because we don't dispute that he's risen from the dead. We absolutely wholeheartedly embrace that. But I want to experience more of the way they did. I want to walk in there on Sunday, and I want to have it affirmed in a way that is life-changing for me.
Yes.
Not just blasé and more the same.
Well, I'm interested you say that too, because I remember when I had lots of country services, and I'll admit that I got to the fifth one and I'd say, Christ has risen. And the parish would respond with joy. And so let's see where this takes us. Lisa, what do you find challenging when you break it open?
There is a lot challenging here, but I think the central challenge for me, and maybe this answers your question, do you believe this? You know, we say, this is the word of the Lord, thanks be to God. We should be, what? You know, and that question rings through the Gospels. You know, Jesus asked it of Peter, who do you say I am? And of Martha. And I want to flip back to the reading from a couple of weeks ago. And Jesus' words to Martha, he says, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing me will never die. Do you believe this?
Yeah.
You know, and that's the challenge. Do we? This is astonishing. This is outrageous. We should be challenged by this. Jesus lived. We will live. Do we believe it? I think that's the fundamental challenge that's thrown out in the Gospels.
It really is. Thank you. So, well, let's stick with you, Lisa. You're on a roll, but let's have some good news, because I think it's bursting out. You put it out there.
My original thinking of my good news was about 2 lines long, so I had to kind of expand on it a little bit. The good news for me is that at the end of everything, when the darkness appears to finally close in around us, that we will hear a voice calling our name, and that voice will be familiar to us. We will know it. We will know that we've heard it all our lives. C.S. Lewis talks about that at the end of the Screwtape Letters. Also, it was you all along. And we'll know that what appeared to be the end is actually just the beginning. And I can't say much more than that. It's the deepest joy of my faith. We will know his voice, and he will speak to us as someone who knows us and knows nothing but love for us. And it doesn't get better than that.
It really doesn't. Let's have you, Manny, and you know how you respond.
Yeah, I'll sort of tack on to Lisa, the calling out by name. Mary hung around to look, for Jesus once she and the others noticed that his body was missing. This is a hugely significant moment for women and the recognition of their value. I think Jesus did not just randomly appear to Mary first. The good news is he deliberately wanted to be announced to the world through Mary first and then to the disciples. So that is amazingly good news, because it speaks to a lot of the things that were happening in early first century times. Women were not recognized or even respected. But like the time that Jesus announced himself to the Samaritan woman at the well, telling her who he was, Jesus again is deliberately saying, Mary, you go and tell the others. That is amazing good news.
Stepping outside power structures, isn't he? Gary.
Yes.
Gary.
Again, for me also, Mary features front and central here. I love the fact that, she came to the wrong conclusion. She saw the stone rolled away and ran away and said, they've taken him, he's gone. And then When they get back, it's quite interesting that we know that the first disciple hesitates, the second one, Peter, runs in. What does Mary do? There's no talk of her going in at that stage. When the other two go back, was she outside weeping? Did they have a conversation? I don't know. But what I do know is she didn't go back. She stayed right there. And in the midst of her grief, when she saw the angels, the question was the same. Where have they taken him? I want to go and find him. Mm-hmm. And the good news for me is that in that perseverance and standing firm in the midst of anxiety and confusion, that's when she has this encounter and Jesus calls her name. So the good news for me is that Jesus speaks. We don't have to get it right. He will call us out of confusion into crystal clarity if we just hang in there long enough. And he does that.
Yeah, thank you indeed. And in the half light of dawn, it's a fairly brave thing to go and bend and look inside a tomb. Just amazing stuff. And John telling us so clearly. So let's apply this. And Gary, stick with you for a moment. And application in faith life today. Application
in faith life for me is the example of Mary. We don't have to have the right theology. We don't have to have the answer. But stick around and keep asking, where is he? Where is he? The first Easter for me is defined in such a big way by Mary's question, where is he? Where have you put him? I want to find him. And if we can go into Easter like that, then we get the answer. So that's my challenge to certainly our folk on Easter Day is keep asking the question, where is he? He's risen. He told us he was going to rise. Stick around for the experience of the resurrection yourself. It'll come to you. Don't go heading off home to contemplate it like the other disciples did.
Thank you. So what for you, Mannie?
I think from my point, we're being encouraged to open our eyes. Too often, I think we accept the status quo and things as they are. Peter was an important disciple, and the other disciple who's not mentioned, we're told, is the one that Jesus loved. And then we have Mary. The fact that Jesus or Mary hung around, that's brilliant. That's significant. Peter and the one Jesus loved, they, went away. They didn't hang around to search. But Mary was willing to continue, the vigil and wait. That's a significant bit of information, I think, that we're being told. I think we're being challenged to review how we look at things. Are we also having the, sort of the tenacity, the patience, the resilience to search, but also to wait? But who we hear the message from, if we just look to the key figures, the important figures, the ones that are loved, we sometimes may forget because the message will come sometimes to people who are not expecting. So I think we're being reminded to listen, not just to important people, but to everyone, which is where Mary comes in. Mary was an important person. So we're reminded, place value in people like Mary as well.
Thank you, Mannie. Lisa, a final word.
Wow, I don't know how I go after you two. Perhaps I'll go to the heart of this reading. So what this reading tells us, that the light has and the light always will conquer the darkness, that we are, even in our darkest time, never abandoned, and he will come back for us just as he came back for Mary. He did come back for us, and he knows us. And we are known through and through. So I think today is a day of rejoicing because all of creation has changed because of what is described here. So let's end with this. Jesus, the Christ, is risen from the dead, and one day we will encounter him as Mary did, and his great love, and he will call your name.
Hallelujah indeed. Lisa, Gary, Mannie, nothing but thanks be to God, and thank you.